Good morning. I wanted to read chapter 2 so I don't keep some of you guys in suspense. That way I can have another chapter ready. I'm going to start. I'll be reading from chapter 2. Good morning, everybody. I'm going to be reading from chapter 2, and it's called The Wild Child. Hi, Megan. What I forgot to do was take my last video and post it on YouTube. I'm going to do that, and I'm going to do that to this one too. So that way they're easier to find if people wanted to listen to me reading the chapters with little interlogs or interludes in between them. Hi, Laura. So this morning we're going to have chapter 2, and I have about 45 minutes that I can hang out with y'all. I have to go sell Girl Scout cookies, so I have to finish getting ready for that. So that is on my list. Chapter 2 is really short, which, I might I might just read chapter 3 as well, because chapter 2 is like literally only a couple pages. So, chapter 2, The Wild Child. I was a rambunctious, sassy, and wild child. I was running the streets with no care in the world. I had no consequences in my mind. Now, looking back at this time, I know I was looking for something deeper that wouldn't be found until years later. During this time, I met my first ex-husband. Hi to everyone who is joining. We met about a month after I moved back to Las Vegas. I honestly know I moved into this relationship way too fast for anyone, especially for my own good. I was on a serious rebound trip, and it was not what I needed at the time. Also, during this time is when I started, when I moved back to Vegas, I started experiencing those dreams. I'm drawing a blank right now. The dreams where the sleep paralysis dreams. I used to have those like back to back, and I'm gonna just tell you about the one major one that made my mom and my dad like laugh at me. So I was sleeping. This was like right after we got back home, and I remember my sister at the time moved into my old room, which had her room open. Instead of her just staying in her room, she kicked me out of my own room. God knows why. But so I was sleeping in her room, and I remember waking up to seeing the room all dark, but there were all of these black creatures around me. And I tried to get up so I could get out of the room, but I couldn't move. I couldn't speak, and I was trying to scream, and nothing was coming out. And I was stuck in this state of just like here. I couldn't move my head. I could move my eyes. And all of these creatures just started coming around me, and then they all like grabbed onto me and held me down. It's like sitting on my chest, holding down my arms and my legs, like as if I was being captured. So I remember like trying to like move around and break free. And during this whole time, like I finally get up and run. I run to the door, like jump off the bed, run to the door, and the little gremlins dude slid my sister's dresser in front of the door faster than I could move. And I remember hitting the dresser, falling on the ground, and them grabbing me and pulling me back into the bed. Now, by this time, I'm like really freaked out because I'm trying to get up out of there, and I can't because they keep holding me back. So as they're holding me down, one of them's trying to cover my mouth at the same time. So I'm screaming at the top of my lungs, and nothing is coming out. And then finally, I let out this loud wail, like, ah, like as high as I possibly could. And I finally heard myself, and that woke me up. And I jumped up out of bed. And my mom and my dad come running into my room. They bust the door open thinking, something major's going on. And my dad looks at me and he goes, "What is happening?" And I looked at both of them and I just started laughing because that's all I could do. I'm like, I don't even know what's happening right now. I said, I just had the craziest dream or something, and I told them what was going on. And both my parents looked at me and was like, "You're crazy." And then they closed the door and walked away. That next morning, I woke up, I had bruise marks from like fingerprints of someone holding me down. Like, that was the freakiest thing I've ever had in my life. And I've had that a couple more times since then. But I have not had one that serious in a long time. But so I know, like, after my first relationship from chapter 1, I was like traumatized to the point to where that could have been him in my dream holding me down all over again. Like, I don't know. Anything is possible. All right, so back to my story. So I said we moved in, which is for my for project number 2. We moved in about a month after I moved back to Las Vegas. And honestly, now I know I moved into this relationship way fast for anyone, especially for my own good. I was on a serious rebound trip, and it was not what I needed at the time. But Project 2 and I hit it off. He was tall and had a very dark complex. His nationality was Panamanian. We met at a house party. Despite our age difference of 14 years, we were inseparable. Life was good. It felt good. I was learning about myself through him, and he showed me a different life than I was used to. I was intrigued, and I was hooked. But little did I know, eventually I would be bamboozled. Shortly after Project 2 and I met, we moved in together. Life should have been grand, but I moved into a mess. I moved into a situation of drugs, fraud, prostitution, and even more domestic abuse. You see, we lived with Project 2's friend in his apartment. I didn't participate in said activities, just to let you know, but I was very aware of it. Good morning, Stephanie. One afternoon, Project 2's so-called friend came in the room with us, and he said to my ex, "Since I'm allowing you two to live here, I'm going to need you to do me a favor." And my ex said, "Sure, what do you need?" And his friend proceeded to fix his lips, and out came, "Since I'm allowing y'all to live here damn near rent-free, I want to have sex with Alana. Just me and my girl and her. We've been listening to you two have sex, and I feel that we can make her feel good too." Meanwhile, I'm standing there listening to this, shaking my head no over and over and over again. Like, that was something I would have never thought, out of everything he could think of, that was what he was going to ask him. Project 2 stood up and bum rushed him. They fought in the room at my feet, and I just stood there. Like, what was I supposed to do? Stop them? I was not putting myself in between two grown-ass men to get hurt. Project 2 told his friend that we were leaving and moving out and not coming back. We found an apartment to move into shortly afterwards, and because of his protection for me, I thought things would be looking up and up. Shortly after we moved into our place, I found out that I was pregnant. Hold on, I'm losing my spot here. Okay. That was one of the scariest feelings running through my body. I remember coming home after work that day, and I had went to Planned Parenthood and asked for a test. I wasted money because I already knew what the answer was. But it was for, I guess it was just for a reassurance, I guess. I sat in my car, in the carport, and I cried, thinking to myself, how was I going to tell him? How was I going to tell my parents? And how many other questions had crossed my mind? My emotional roller coaster was rampant. I felt pulled all over the place. I was in my car for a good hour and a half before Project 2 came home. He walked past the car and noticed me sitting there. He came over and asked me what was wrong. So I just came out and told him. I said, "Well, I'm pregnant." And he said, "Cookie," that was his nickname for me. I already knew that. I've been feeling nauseous the last couple of days, and I was wondering where it was coming from. But the choice is yours, and you already know the answer. By this time, I was 6 weeks pregnant. I was confused, an emotional wreck, and unstable. And in that moment, I decided I needed to have an abortion. I was not mentally prepared to have a child. And I was still unsure about my own life. So how can I be responsible for someone else? So just telling you this part hurts me deeply. Out of all the things that I've gone through, this wound is still deep and hurts like no other. Because if you've never had an abortion, that is something that you will never understand going through mentally or physically. I told my mom a few days later. I met her at a Chinese restaurant, and I walked in, and the smell was so overwhelming, I could barely stand to be in there. That's when I knew being pregnant was real. I said, that's when I definitely felt pregnant, because I love Chinese food with a passion. And y'all know that because I post about that all the time. And I said, hold on. I sat at the table with her and her coworker. They asked if I was going to eat, and I said, nope, I'm not feeling well. And all I could think about was not wanting to throw up on that table. My mother, without skipping a beat, said, "You're pregnant, huh?" And I said, yes, and bursted into tears. And then she says, well, now that I know, you can eat and relax. You know, doing what mothers do. Her and her friends started laughing because they could see how that smell was getting to me, and said, food aversions suck. So we will eat this for you, because that's what mothers do. They make you feel good in different ways. She asked me what my plans were for the pregnancy, and I told her that I was going to have the abortion, and she said, okay, you know best. And then the conversation changed. We went on like it was just another normal day. I scheduled my procedure. Project 2 drove me, and my mom met us there, and we sat in the waiting room together. The nurse called me back and asked me to get undressed from the waist down to lie on the table, and it was cold, the room and the table. On the right side of me was an ultrasound machine. The doctor came in, asked me a few questions to make sure that it was me. She poured the only warm thing in the room on me, which was the jelly they used to guide the scope on my stomach. And I laid there just staring at the ceiling. As she rolled it around looking for the fetus, she said, "Oh, look, there it is." I turned towards her, and and the screen was facing towards me. And then my stomach knotted up. Tears started rolling down my face slowly, and on the inside, I started to regretting my decision. I didn't say anything. I just laid there and suffered in silence. I let her do the procedure as I held back as many tears as I could. Once it was over, I was allowed to go home. I can still see the image of my baby. It's the only image that I have and that I keep close to me, even though it has scarred me for life. There is no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside of you, by Maya Angelou. They really need to have counseling sessions for women who want to or have been through an abortion. Or maybe they do now. I don't know. I haven't been back to Planned Parenthood since then. The emotional factor is something that you could never imagine going through. And we as women need to really talk about it and cry with one another to let them know that it is okay. We shouldn't have to live through this alone. Once back home, Project 2 helped me get comfortable so that I could rest. And then he left. I didn't see him or hear from him until the next day. I was emotionally dysfunctional, and he was gone. I was a wreck. I was sad. I was confused. I was conflicted, and I had no one to express what I was feeling. I was left alone to tend to my own thoughts. I was broken, and I don't think I even slept that night. I just sat up crying, wondering why I even went through the procedure, or even how I could just be so heartless, or how he could just be so heartless and just leave. From that day on, I became bitter. A piece of me died, and I went into a dark space. He finally came home, and I went off. I yelled, screamed, and cried. I slammed doors, you name it. I was pissed. His only excuse was, I figured you needed to be alone, and I didn't want to bother you. Wrong damn answer, buddy. Wrong damn answer. I resented him from that day forth. My due date was September 11th, 2002. I will never forget that date. And my mom even commented on it and said it was a bad omen because of the tragedy from 9/11 from that year before. But that date will be forever engraved in me and will always be celebrated. Later on throughout our relationships, I found that he cheated on me that night. And that was just one of many instances yet that I still stayed with him because I didn't know my worth. I figured he would change, but he never did. We would fight about it, and he would just find another new woman to be with. It was a vicious cycle. So many lies he told, yet I just brushed it off. So many arguments, and we couldn't leave each other alone. I even went on and married him. I couldn't even tell you why. Well, I do know why. I was broken in several pieces, and he was a disaster, and I figured, well, we could just make it work. I should have listened to my mom when she asked me on my wedding day if I wanted to go to Pahrump for a spa day instead of driving downtown, heading towards the Strip to go and get married. Now in here, it's in bold letters too. It says, ladies, listen to your mother. As much as we want to argue with them, they are always right. So listen to her. It says, even if you don't agree, it won't make sense in that moment, but you'll be grateful that you did. During our short 1.5 year marriage, he started physically abusing me, doing drugs heavily, becoming paranoid, and quit his job. I had sent him to jail while we were visiting Oakland. Our car broke down multiple times while traveling from Vegas. I was fed up because he kept asking me to get it fixed, to call someone and to make sure that it worked. I told him he needed to be a man and do it his damn self. He didn't like that answer. He flipped out. He started swinging and punching on me in the parking lot of Sears at the mall. This was all in the car, by the way. We were sitting in the parking lot in the car that wasn't working, and his son was sitting in the back seat watching all of this go down. I grabbed his son and I said, okay, now you're wondering where the son came from. He was about 7 to 8 years old from a previous relationship. We didn't see him much, but we tried to be with him when we could. But back to the story. So it was downpouring, just like in the movies, on a dramatic scene, yet this was happening in my real life. I told his son we were going inside the mall to get away. I walked off crying, holding his hand, while his dad stayed in the car. Walking towards the bathroom, people were staring at me, looking at me like I was a foreign object that didn't belong. And his son says to me, Alana, you need to go wash your face. It's really bad and people keep looking at us. Hold on. Agena says, when I read that your mom suggested a spa day instead of getting married, I thought, wow, definitely listen to your mother. Exactly. So he's told me that I needed to go wash my face. It was really bad and that people were looking at us. That's when I knew something was wrong. We made it to the bathroom, and that's when I saw my face. I had a black eye on the right, and my left eye had a cut underneath it that was bleeding. My wedding ring caused this from me trying to block him. It was one of those kind of moves, and my wedding ring cut my face, which I still have that scar, which is right there. I had a knot on the side of my head from him slamming my head into the seatbelt holder on the door. I washed my face, walked back out to the car, because then I was pissed. Sadness wasn't even a factor anymore. He started yelling at me again, and I told him if he got out the car, I was calling the cops. At that point, I didn't even care. He didn't listen. I called the cops. They showed up with the quickness. There were regular cops, canine cops, just cops everywhere. They placed his son and me in the back of one of the police cars and arrested him for domestic violence. He spent the next few days in the Oakland jail and was released. We went back to Vegas shortly afterwards, and it was a quiet car ride. Even after all of the turmoil he caused me, I still stayed like a dummy, but the nonsense that made me leave and was and still is one of the saddest reasons only, or funniest but saddest reasons only. Like I told you before, he started doing drugs. It got so bad that he used to tell me that people at work had it out for him. Project 2 used to be a delivery driver for Miller Beer. He said once loading his truck that one of the forklift drivers tried to run him off the dock. I laughed and told him he was just losing his mind. Then he started trying to convince me that my dad had spies at his job watching his every move. I came home from work one day and started heating up leftovers. I made us some Kool-Aid, started cleaning the kitchen, and took out the trash. He had been home because, he quit his job by then, but he wasn't doing anything but kept himself locked up in a room. Earlier that day, we sat and argued on Yahoo Messenger while I was at work. We did that on a regular basis. I had called him downstairs to eat, handed him his plate, his glass, and he sat at the table. I grabbed my food and sat next to him. He sat and took a bite of his food, not really thinking too much into it. Oh no, he asked me to take a bite of his food. Not really thinking too much into it, I did. I noticed that it wasn't hot enough and told him that I was just going to reheat it. He went back upstairs. The food was ready again. He came back down, but this time asked me to drink from his cup. And I asked him why. Do you think I poisoned you or something? And he says, I don't know. Did you? Like with the straight face, like as if I was just going to try to off him right then and there. He says, did you spray Raid in my food? And I laughed. I laughed so hard I had tears in my eyes. Hold on. I laughed so hard that I had tears in my eyes. He ran in the kitchen and said, what did you spray in here earlier? I replied, Lysol, because I took out the trash and it smelled in here. To which he said, I don't smell it. I know you sprayed Raid on my food. You and your dad are conspiring to kill me. He has his CIA friends following me, watching me, and I know he's bugged this house, and now he has you trying to kill me off secretly. I took our food, threw it in the trash, and I left. I filed for divorce and disappeared from him. A lover I made too much room for almost walked off with all of my stuff. And that's by, I cannot pronounce this person's first name, but his last name is Shang. And that is chapter 2. Trying to think. I'm going to read chapter 3. That way you guys can have more info. Chapter 3 is titled The Sex Spell. It says, if your heart still has anger from the past, you won't find happiness in the present. Unknown. I do not know who wrote that quote, but that quote spoke like volumes to me. Me trying to move on, I moved into my own apartment after Project 2's debacle of a relationship. At one point during our divorce, he threatened me, saying that he would run me over with his car if he saw me with another man. So to avoid him looking me up and trying to find me, I got an apartment in my brother's name. I lived there for about 6 months trying to get out of my depressing funk, and I still wasn't happy. But my friend suggested I should try online dating. Now, that's a wild-ass adventure right there. One particular site I came across, Project 3. He was 6'4", tall, a light-skinned man who had a baby face and was cute. He was originally from Los Angeles and moved to Vegas for a new start here. He hit me up and we chatted off and on for a couple weeks before we actually decided to meet. The day we decided on came up and I started to feel sick. I thought it was just nerves from me trying to date again. So I mustered up the energy to go and meet him. I drove to his apartment because I didn't want him knowing where I lived, and I didn't want him driving me around because I was not comfortable with that. So I was not trying to be stranded somewhere with no way out, so I made the rules. He got in the car and we left. We went to Samurai Sam's. It was a teriyaki bowl place, the one that serves like some of the most delicious yakisoba noodles ever, at least in my eyes. We ordered, we sat down, started talking. He was very shy at first, and then he made me feel calm. He seemed harmless. Our food arrived, and how I was feeling got worse. I told him I needed to leave because I was just not going to last. He bagged up our stuff, got in the car, and then we left. While driving, I felt nauseous. All I thought was, dear God, do not let me puke in this car. Project 3 and I pulled up to his place, and he got out. And I asked to use his bathroom. And as soon as I stepped out of the car, I lost all my marbles. I threw up right at his feet. I didn't get him, but I was sure close enough to do so. He was so caring in that moment, and he rubbed my back and asked me if I was okay and brought me inside. I laid on his couch and went to sleep. Everything crept up on me so fast. I was hot, I was dizzy, I was sick, and just out of it. Come to find out, the next day, I had the flu. Great first date, huh? Yeah, it was disgusting. He was there for me, and he didn't even have to, but what he did by... Hold on, I'm losing my spot. Hi to everyone who is joining. I just see stuff like popping up on the side of my face. He was there for me, and he didn't even have to. What he did by letting me stay there. We went out, and he went out and he bought me soup, ginger ale, and some medicine. Like, who does those kinds of gestures like that when you just meet a person? So he left a soft spot on my heart for him. I was shocked. I had a man thrown up on me on the first date. I'm unsure if I would even call him back, and that's just me being truthful. After my sickness, we started hanging out on a regular basis. I never did just get to date around like I planned, though I figured I didn't need to after what Project 3 showed me. And let me just tell you, the sex was amazing. But it also made my judgment cloudy. It put me in la la land. And I know I'm not the only one. We've had all types of sex that made us stupid. You know, it just felt good to be loved and touched and caressed and talked to like I wanted and needed. It was refreshing and very satisfying. Plus, who doesn't like a well-endowed man? That was a new realm for me, and had me hypnotized. Actually, dickmatized is the word. That's what we're going to call this phase of my life. The art of seduction is knowing what she really wants and giving it to her in a way that takes her breath away. Anonymous. Our whole relationship was based on sex. From the beginning all the way to the very end. We had sex everywhere. Our apartment, the cars, the movies, park, work, friend's house, just everywhere. My life turned into a porno. I found out halfway through our relationship that he was addicted to porn and other women. This dick spell was so bad that I wouldn't even listen to my own friends. It felt like they just didn't want me to be with him. And it was for very good reasons. But that dick, though, y'all know, so bad, so bad. Mind-boggling, mind-blowing. It was like having your memory wiped by the tool in the movie Men in Black. His dick was the flash to wipe away what he didn't want me to know or remember. That was his superpower. He was my kryptonite, and Project 3 knew how to run game. Project 3 was a ladies' man, the man women gravitated towards. His shyness is what made women fall for him. It's what got me. You think, oh, he's shy, he's quiet, well-mannered. Well, he must keep to himself, and he just wants to be loved by one person. Wrong. He had self-esteem problems. He never felt satisfied. He wanted to be loved on by any woman who would give him the attention. I would be at work, and he would be at somebody else's house having sex with them. I would be asleep, and he would be on multiple dating sites searching for his next big fuck. I would go out of town, and he would bring women into my home and have sex with them. Every time I caught him, we'd have sex, and he'd promise it would never happen again. But it did, and it always did. He started sneaking out at night. I'd fall asleep and wake up, and he would be gone. I would call and text all night long, no answer. He would just show up right before I had to leave for work, and his excuses were, oh, I just went to the homie's house and fell asleep. Lame-ass excuses. I wanted to give him the benefit of the doubt, but deep down, I knew he was lying. Every time we had sex, I just couldn't say no. I could be yelling at him and until I was blue in the face, and still the sex made me melt. He started stressing me out so bad that I started missing work. I started lying to my friends, and I felt like I was just a joke. Project 3 wanted to change. He wanted to man up, or said he wanted to change. He wanted to man up and make me proud. Project 3 said that he wanted to join the military. He asked me to marry him, and against my better judgment, I said yes. Project 3 promised me that he wanted to take care of me if something happened, so that I would be his fallback, and I would be the only person, and I was the only person at that time that he trusted. The only person he could allow to watch over him and his belongings, and to also help me pay bills because we were struggling so bad. I was knee-deep in debt, medical bills flowing out of my pockets like crazy, student loans, and I was also, at that time, levied by the IRS. They shut down all my bank accounts, put me in the negative by the thousands. We didn't tell anyone we got married at that time. It was a t-shirt and jeans kind of wedding down at the chapel on Las Vegas Boulevard. Us and 2 friends who signed our wedding certificate, and that was it. We were together for a year and a half before we got married, same length as Project 2. We kept it a secret for a few months, and I finally filed our marriage certificate in Clark County and got a phone call from one of my friends. And she asked me, Alana, did you and Project 3 get married? And I didn't want to lie to her, so I told her the truth. She already knew the answer because she worked for the county's office and was filing my paperwork, so I was busted. So I caved in and told the rest of my friends, but I did not tell my parents. I was too ashamed to, so I hid it for as long as I could. That right there was a major indication that he and I should have never gotten married. If I couldn't tell my family and friends, what kind of man was I really with? Before he signed up with the Army, we got into another fight. He was acting out again, stressing me out, making me second guess why we were even still together, let alone married. And once again, he used his sex to distract me. But this time, he put me in the hospital. Y'all better hold on. But this was not on purpose, though. While in this dramatic makeup porno scene we were creating on the couch, and action, because, you know, everything is hella dramatic. I'm halfway on the couch on my back, and he's on the floor acting like a drill sergeant, counting cadences, then turning into a circus trapeze, flipping me all over the place. And then it happened. One good thrust, and I froze. I felt like someone stabbed me on my inside. I thought I just had like a gas bubble. And he paused. Then he slowly started up again, and the pain intensified. I made him stop. I told him I needed to go lay down. Something wasn't right. I walked upstairs and laid on the bed. A couple hours passed. By this time, it was 2 a.m. I woke up in so much pain that I couldn't move. I was cold, I was vomiting, and I was in tears. I made him take me to the emergency room. 4 a.m., I found out I had 2 cysts the size of grapefruits on my ovaries, and one of them ruptured. He punctured my cyst jaw. Like, not just, tapped it. No, he broke through that motherfucker and busted that shit wide open. Like, I can't even explain that kind of pain to you guys. It says it was punctured to the point to where I was bleeding internally, and I had to have emergency surgery. I had to have 2 blood transfusions, and I was cut like I had a C-section, and I was also in the hospital for 1 week to recover before they released me. That's my sex sent me to the ER story. I could have totally been on that show, but, I didn't submit it because I didn't know it existed until way after all of this had happened. Project 3 took me to the hospital, left when I was sent up to my room after surgery, and then I didn't see or hear from him for 3 days. Yet another man to abandon me during my time of need. He would call and check on me, but that's about all I got out of him. When they were ready to release me, he was late picking me up. I was pissed. How does one not even be considerate and be there for you when you really need them? How are you late picking up your wife? Where the fuck were you? He arrived, he helped me in the car and took me to my parents' house. I was forced to live there for 1 month because I was restricted from stairs and I was on disability. My apartment was a 3-story townhouse. There was no way I would make it up those stairs. I could barely walk or stand up straight. That was a month of hell because he wouldn't even help me at my parents' house. He went back to his old fucking ways again because, my vagina was indisposed and broken. There was nothing I could do about it. I couldn't drive. I couldn't chase him. I definitely couldn't have sex with him. And I started to give up at that point. He eventually got approved and got into the Army and left for boot camp. My mini vacation didn't last very long from him. I was hoping the military would help him to see things straight and give him guidance. Instead, he quit shortly after AIT training and went AWOL. He hopped on a Greyhound bus and came back to Vegas. A few months passed with him being back home, and the economy crashes. At that time, I was working for a civil engineering company doing commercial and residential construction plans, and everything that dealt with construction halted. It was already a slow decline, but at this time it was bad. I ended up losing my job, the company closed its doors, and I was unemployed. Both of us out of work now, and I needed a break. I was stressed out, not knowing where our next opportunity was. My best friend asked if I wanted to take a trip to the beach with her over the weekend. I was ready to go. Project 3 and I were already at each other's throats, so I left. He called me saying he wanted to come meet us, but then he never showed. He came up with the lie that he lost his wallet and he had to turn around and find it because he wouldn't make it. We came back Sunday. He was actually home when I got there, shockingly. He asked me to help look for his wallet. I obliged, even though I already knew he was full of shit. I ended up finding pictures of him with other girls. The picture that made me lose my mind was of him and some girl at my parents' house in their pool while I was in Alabama visiting my family. I walked up to him threw the pictures at him, and started screaming. He couldn't hide his lies anymore. He documented all of his endeavors with all of these women, and I blacked out. I spazzed out. I slapped him. I grabbed him, and then he grabbed me by my throat, threw me on the couch, and I kept trying to hit him, and he would block it, and then he would just hit me back. We fought for a minute, and then he held me down by my wrist, sat on my chest, and wouldn't let me up. He asked me if I was calm enough to let me go so that we could talk. And I told him I was calm, but I was done talking. I was done trying to work it out, and that I was done being his fool. Then he released me. I told him he needed to leave, to get his stuff and get out of my apartment. And he said he wasn't going anywhere. I let him know that if he didn't leave, that I was calling the cops. I gave him 5 minutes. I walked outside. I transferred all the money from our joint account into my personal account, and then I called the cops. The police arrived. I told them everything that had transpired. They went inside and talked to him. I got a crazy feeling that night that I was going to jail. They were taking way too long with him in there. I called my best friend who I was with earlier that day and told her I just knew I was going to jail. I gave her my parents' information, and I said, if you didn't hear back from me, to call them and let them know what was happening. By this time, it was like 11 p.m. The police came back out and said, well, because you are the instigator of the situation and you hit him first, we have to take you to jail. I said, yeah, I know. I figured it would end this way, even though I'm the one that's all bruised up. They put me in handcuffs. They drove me down to the jail. I spent 3 days in jail. They dropped all the charges against me and released me. I had no priors. It was my first offense, and I know the judge had to laugh when he read my case, like, really, they arrested her for a slap. My parents asked me if I learned my lesson, and I said, yep. I know that the next time to give them a reason to arrest me and to make it worth the stay, because 3 days is fucked up for a slap, let me tell you that. They laughed, I laughed, and then I bolted to take a shower because that place was just nasty. When my parents tried to bail me out of jail, they discovered that my name had changed and that Project 3 and I were married. So I finally had to come out and tell them the truth about what went on. They weren't too happy about it. My mom says, now you need to go change it back and so that you can get away from him. And I agreed. So later on that night, I found out that Project 3 also trashed our apartment. He and his friends got a moving truck. They ransacked my place. He took all of my possessions, left my door wide open, destroyed stuff in there. He also slashed all 4 of my tires on my car, just like a bitch, because, that's what hurt people do. They try to hurt other people to make them feel just as bad as they do. I filed for divorce. I filed for a restraining order and a vandalism report. And just to let you know, they didn't even want to take my report because according to the law, he can take, destroy, and do whatever he wants because we were married. That was a hard lesson to learn, even if it's something before you got married. So leave yourself a mental note from my experiences. When dealing with the law, a person or persons is considered living with... When dealing with the law, a person or person is considered living with you, even if they have a toothbrush in your residence. Mail coming to your address really makes them living there, and you will have to serve them with a 30-day eviction notice. Squatters have more rights in your own fucking house than you do. So think twice before letting people stay with you or stay the night with you or even living with you. And it says, the last quote for this chapter, the hottest love has the coldest end, Socrates, because that's how it is. He started off nice, and in the end, he took all of my possessions and made it so that I wasn't able to be mobile by slashing my tires and trying to get back at me for all of the stuff that he felt that I did to him, which in return, he did more damage to me than I ever did to him, because all I did was just try to love him. But that's the end of my story for chapter 2 and 3. And I hope you guys enjoyed it. I'll read probably chapter 4 next week. But if you guys have any questions, or if you guys have any statements or things that stuck with you or something that you wanted to speak about, because, that was a lot. There was 2 chapters, one dealing with, 2 dealing with domestic violence again, one dealing with abortion, and then also going to jail. So like those are major high and lows in there. Like I said, my life was crazy. It was not easy. I made my life worse than what it was supposed to be because I didn't listen to myself. But from chapter 4 going forth, it starts to get better. So I will talk to everyone later. I got to get ready for my Girl Scout cookie boost. And if you have questions, hit me up. See ya.